Welcome, church family. Today I'm coming to you live from outside. It's been a wet couple of weeks, and I thought I'd take the opportunity to broadcast from somewhere other than the confines of my home. Today we're talking about the man considered by many as America's first homegrown composer, William Billings. We'll learn a bit about who Billings was, then deconstruct his most famous hymn, Chester. Then I'll be singing the only William Billings hymn in our hymnal, a canon called When Jesus Wept. I'll also talk about the difference between a canon and a round, for those of you just dying to know. Now, let's travel to colonial America and explore two major concepts. The first was a debate amongst theologians, scholars, and musicians. For the early Reformed Protestants who settled in New England at the end of the 17th century, musical skill wasn't a high priority. While congregational singing was encouraged, many couldn't read the words of the Psalms, and even fewer could decipher the musical notation. A form of musical spoon-feeding began, where a leader would sing a line of music, then the congregation would repeat it back. This process came to be known as lining out. Even though lining out did the trick for the untrained, uneducated congregations, there were two problems. First, it limited the amount of tunes that a congregation knew. Second, the leading singers were free to modify or embellish the melodies, which caused confusion, as the same hymn might sound totally different from one church to the next. Despite the challenges, this style of singing dominated New England and became known as the old way of singing. This full-voiced, rough-around-the-edges way of worshiping had its detractors, though. And by the 1720s, the clergy made a concentrated effort to return to the authority of notated music and a standardized way of singing, which they called regular singing. The battle between old way and regular singing has repeated in some way or another throughout church music history. At the Council of Trent, held by the Catholic Church between 1545 and 1563, the question of whether to return to chant singing was put on the table as a reaction to the ornate polyphony that had evolved over the last 100 years. Even today, critics of contemporary church music make the argument that worship bands are self-indulgent, performing songs that are hard for a congregation to follow vocally and that have little to no lyrical substance. Eventually, the regular singing won over New England parish holders. Singing schools were established to train congregants how to sing correctly and how to read music. Twice, sometimes even 3 times a week, congregants could actually meet up and practice the hymns for Sunday morning worship. While I'd love to see more of you at choir practice on Thursday nights, you don't need to worry about coming to hymn practice, though it is tempting. The second major concept I want to touch on is the existential question that faced the newly founded United States of America. What did it mean to be American? Americans were transplants from Europe, bringing with them the languages, religious beliefs, customs, and music of their homelands. The general population brought with them a vast repertoire of folk music passed down through oral tradition, while the educated and elite members of society revered the famous European composers of their time. In Boston, the Handel and Haydn Society was formed in 1815 by Lowell Mason to encourage the refinement of singing and musicianship while promoting American performances of these composers' sacred masterworks. But what about music that was made in America? Enter William Billings, a tanner by trade and master singer by vocation. In 1770, Billings published a compilation of 127 original compositions titled The New England Psalm Singer, or American Chorister. This collection of choral anthems and congregational hymns solidified New England as the regional leader in American sacred music and expanded the repertoire of published music 10 times over. Now let's turn to the most famous and often reprinted melody in Billings's publication, Chester. A few things are striking about the composition. First, the melody is in the tenor part. This was Billings' method of composition, and as he was self-taught, it defies the part-writing norms which had existed for the last 100 years. Second, the range is quite high, which probably means Billings expected the congregation to really belt out their parts. Third, the lyrics are unquestioningly patriotic and subversive. Let tyrants shake their iron rod, and slavery clank her galling chains. We fear them not, we trust in God. New England's God forever reigns. Such was the civil unrest at the time of publication that Billings was probably forgiven the insinuation that God was partial to New England, as if he was to have nothing to do with Great Britain. As a hymn, Chester is stirring, but as a piece of resistance propaganda, it was even handier. Billings added 4 additional stanzas in 1778 to reflect the battle in which the colonies were then embroiled. For our purposes, let's hear the final stanza, which is more suited for general praise. Now let's take a look at another piece from Billings's New England Psalm Singer. I was pleased to see this tune is actually in the Presbyterian hymnal, number 312, When Jesus Wept. In the original manuscript of the collection, this ditty was jammed into the corner of a longer anthem, almost as an afterthought. It is, of course, dealing with the story of Jesus weeping when he found out his friend Lazarus had died. The natural minor mode that Billings chose makes the tune somber, which is appropriate for the lyrical content. When Jesus Wept is an example of a canon. It is not a round, which is similar to a canon. A round is a short, simple musical phrase sung over and over, with singers entering at different points, repeating ad nauseum. Think, row, row, row your boat. With a canon, different melodic phrases have been composed to harmonize with one another, so that each singer may continue to sing each successive melody without having to repeat any material. The difference may seem minute, but a canon is slightly more complex than a round. Here is When Jesus Wept. I'll sing it through once so you can hear each melodic phrase on its own. Then I'll layer my voice to simulate a canon. You can learn the melody at home, then try singing it in unison with the people in your household. Once everyone has it down, try it as a canon.
When Jesus wept the falling tear, in mercy flowed beyond all bound. When Jesus groaned, a trembling fear seized all the guilty world around. When Jesus wept the falling tear, in Jesus flowed beyond all bound. When Jesus wept a trembling fear, when Jesus wept a trembling fear, when Jesus glowed beyond all round, when Jesus glowed a trembling fear seized all the guilty world around.
As usual, if you enjoyed today's video, share it with a friend. If you want to tell me how much you liked it or how much you hated it, email me at music@firstpress-elcajon.org. I read those emails personally, so be sure and send your comments to that specific account. I'm also still taking suggestions for hymns, so don't be shy. Otherwise, I'm going to keep making videos about the music that interests me. That's all for now, so I'll see you next time.
Yankee Doodle, keep it up. Yankee Doodle.